Welcome to the InforMaven AI Update, a podcast for higher education administrators to discuss the practical use of AI and intelligent agents. I'm JD Mosley-Matchett, the founder and CEO of InforMaven, and this month our guest is Dr. Ruth Slotnick, the Director of Assessment at Bridgewater State University. To hear the entire interview, please visit informaven.ai. What should institutions consider when determining their readiness for AI in assessment? Can you offer some key factors that higher education institutions should consider when determining their readiness for AI in assessment, and how can they move forward strategically?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I hear a lot of people talk about policy, no policy. Even at the AAC&U January meeting, I did a session with Peter Shea and Devin Walton, and there was some concern about, do we create a policy? Is too much of a moving target? And it's important to keep some clear boundaries to not only help the institution understand what is its boundary around generative AI, but to help the faculty understand what is its boundary around AI, and to help students understand what are their boundaries around AI. And there was a recent article written about, where is the line? This is literally the title of the paper. Where is the line? It's a blurred line. It's an absurd line. Right? So, we got to have some lines. So generative AI isn't just being ready for the technology. It's about culture. It's about mission. It's about governance structure. It's about strategic alignment to those things, like, the structure, the mission. And I think that many institutions assume that Gen AI readiness means having the right tools. These tools are really expensive. That's a huge barrier. So my observation is that many universities are generally interested in innovation, but they're struggling with how to operationalize it effectively. I don't have a clear answer on just how to get started, but I do think that, as Peter Shea says, and he observed in a study on institutional Gen AI readiness, he said the gap between expressed enthusiasm for Gen AI and actual implementation reveals deep structural resistance to change in higher education. And I think this is particularly an important point when it comes to unionized environments. So, you may have some institutions that are doing complete adoption, but they may not be inside of a union environment, right? This goes back to cultural. Once again, like, what is the culture of your institution? What is the culture of the state? I also think that this is kind of an interesting thing. When we didn't expect COVID, but AI has been talked about for decades. I've got books all over my room here about, AI and sort of how long it's been kind of in the works. And it's almost like we kind of got bowled over by generative AI as if it was something new. And I just wonder, were our heads in the sand? Why didn't we know about it? Why weren't we tuned into it? But here it is. And now we have to think about how this dynamic is manifesting in our field, and we have to grapple with it. It has strengths and it has weaknesses. So it's both this large language model outputting is both unreliable and dangerous, but it also is useful. So trying to figure out how to work inside of this paradox, especially for assessment professionals, we have training. We know what precision and accuracy are. So I think that readiness has sort of this culminating effect where first you got to look at cultural readiness, and specifically in terms of assessment professionals, you got to have some interest in getting ready. And that hesitancy is not going to work well for our field. It could actually hurt you if you're hesitant in using the technology. Then, we need to think about the governance and policy readiness. And I ask, where is the assessment professional at the table for those conversations? And in some cases, there's no place for the assessment practitioner at the table because either A, they haven't been asked, or the institution doesn't know to ask, or for some other reason, the assessment professional isn't part of those conversations. So wherever possible, like for example, in my own work, I create my own policy for my office, and we live inside of that policy, even though policy hasn't been given to us yet institutionally. Also, operational readiness. Where does Gen AI fit into existing assessment workflows? So again, Right now, mostly my work in terms of generative AI has been in my own operational power, how I might use it for survey work, how I might use it for memo writing, how I might use it for report writing, how I might use it for accreditation purposes. But at some point, I need to cross over into how am I working with faculty related to the technology. And some institutions and assessment practitioners are already there. And some of us are still just in the operational space in terms of what is in the locus of our control. I will say that at our institution at Bridgewater, we're offering some mini grants for faculty to apply to tell us about use case scenario. And it can either be a probing project, one where like they've either eschewed the technology or they've been thinking about it, but they haven't had the right motivation to go there. And I feel like at least at Bridgewater State University, in my role for over almost 11 years, I've created a street credibility, trustworthiness. Faculty know that if they experiment in our space with assessment, that space is it's a close relationship to build fluency and build readiness. On the other hand, faculty can also apply who have been doing things with the generative AI space and share it with us. We'll do use case scenario sort of interviews at the end, and then we can package that up and send it out to the faculty for consideration. I don't know necessarily how it will be received, but it's my first try in trying to get something out there to move our campus forward in terms of readiness in the assessment space. There's a whole nother entity that's looking at readiness in the teaching space. That's never been where I've been centered at my institution. I don't do the teaching relationship per se. That's the Office of Teaching and Learning. I don't do the technology per se. That's the Office of Technology and Training Center. I do the assessment piece. I work inside of my intersection, and that's where I see us going slowly, but we're getting there. So in terms of readiness, you gotta look at the culture, you gotta look at your mission, you gotta look at governance structures, you gotta look at strategic plans, but you have to keep in mind those coming in, meaning the students, and those going out in terms of workforce readiness.
Well said. Thank you so much. And I applaud your efforts because someone has to move the needle forward. And too many people seem to be just deer in the headlights, frozen in place. So, bravo. Please visit InforMaven.ai to hear the entire interview.